$5,500. That's what the HOA fined me for snow. They dumped on my property for 3 weeks straight. 6:47 a.m., the metallic scrape of plow blades on asphalt jolted me awake. Diesel engines rumbled outside like tanks rolling through suburbia. I pulled back the curtain expecting to see normal snow removal. Instead, I watched 4 HOA trucks deliberately dump every flake from the entire neighborhood onto my property. Mountain of dirty snow, road salt burning my nostrils, ice chunks the size of bowling balls blocking my driveway completely. The lead driver saw me watching and shrugged like he was doing me a favor. Where else we supposed to put it? My hands shook, not from cold, but from rage. Sarah was still weak from chemo. The twins were counting on this house, and now these bastards thought they could walk all over us. That's when Cordelia Ashford made her biggest mistake. What happened next turned 3 weeks of snow into the most satisfying revenge of my life. What would you do if someone used your lowest moment against you? Drop your HOA nightmare below, because what happened next turned 3 weeks of snow dumps into the most satisfying revenge of my life. But first, you need to understand exactly how we got here. Let me paint you the picture. December 2023, Stonefield Manor, Colorado. One of those cookie-cutter developments where every house looks identical and the HOA thinks they run a small country. I'd just inherited Uncle Pete's corner property. Honestly, it was a godsend. Sarah had just finished her second round of chemo. Medical bills had nearly broken us. Our twins, Emma and Grace, were 16 and worried about everything teenagers worry about, plus whether mom was going to survive. We'd sold our bigger house to pay for treatment. Uncle Pete's place was our fresh start. Now, I'm a heavy equipment operator. 25 years of moving dirt teaches you things about leverage and pressure points. I name all my equipment after World War II generals. My main bulldozer is General Patton. That machine's moved more earth than Sherman's army, and it was about to move some hearts and minds too. Uncle Pete's property sits where the main road meets Stonefield Manor's private street. Here's the kicker. That private street runs 40 feet across my land to connect to the public road. Uncle Pete was nice, always let neighbors use it without fuss. No legal easement, just a handshake deal from 1987. Every morning at 6 a.m., diesel engines fired up like reveille. The metallic scrape of plow blades echoed through the valley, followed by that chemical bite of road salt mixed with exhaust. Then came the crunch of my boots on packed snow as I walked out to see what fresh hell awaited. Enter Cordelia Ashford, 62, inherited wealth, drives a white Mercedes with license plate Queen Bee. Yes, she actually wore pearls to take out garbage. Some people are parodies of themselves. December 15th, I'm drinking coffee when I hear snowplows rumbling. We'd gotten 6 inches overnight, but instead of normal removal, I watched 4 HOA trucks dump every flake from the entire neighborhood onto my property, right where their street meets mine. A mountain of snow, road salt, sand, and whatever else they'd scraped up, blocking my driveway, killing my grass, creating a hazardous mess that would freeze concrete hard within hours. I stepped outside. Cold air hit sharp and clean. Diesel exhaust hung thick, and I could taste metallic road salt on my lips. The lead plow driver looked at me like he was doing me a favor. Where else we supposed to put it? He shrugged. That's when I knew this was an accident. This was policy. See, legitimate snow removal costs money. The HOA saved $15,000 annually using my property as their dump instead of paying for proper removal. They figured Uncle Pete never complained, so why would I? But Uncle Pete didn't have a wife fighting cancer and twins watching every penny. Uncle Pete didn't know what it felt like choosing between groceries and medical copays. And Uncle Pete definitely wasn't a combat engineer who'd spent 3 tours watching powerful people sacrifice little guys for convenience. I stood in that freezing air, watching my breath steam, while 4 trucks finished dumping half the neighborhood's problems on my land. Hydraulic lifts groaned as they raised beds one final time, and I realized something important. These people had no idea who they were messing with. The war was about to begin, and I had all the heavy equipment. But Cordelia's biggest mistake was still coming, and it would happen in front of 60 witnesses. 3 days later, the notice appeared under my windshield wiper like a parking ticket. Official HOA letterhead, fancy logo, the works. $500 fine for snow accumulation blocking street access and creating safety hazards. I read it twice. They were literally fining me for snow. They dumped on my property. The fine notice crinkled like autumn leaves as I crushed it in my fist. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, looking up from breakfast. She was regaining strength, but stress still hit hard. These people just fined us $500 for their snow. The audacity was breathtaking. They'd used my land as their dump, now wanted me to pay for the privilege. The notice included a diagram showing proper snow management techniques and reminded me fines doubled if unpaid within 10 days. I drove straight to Cordelia's oversized colonial. Her Mercedes sat in the circular driveway like a chrome monument to entitlement. When she opened the door, she looked at me like I was selling something unwanted. "Can I help you?" Not stepping aside or inviting me in. "Yeah, explain this $500 fine for snow you dumped on my property." Cordelia adjusted her pearls, smiled that patronizing smile rich people perfect in finishing school. "Mr. Kavanaugh, the HOA has prescriptive rights to that area from 37 years of continuous use. Your uncle understood the arrangement." Prescriptive rights. Fancy legal term meaning if you use someone's land long enough without permission, you can claim ownership. But here's what most people don't know. The use must be hostile without owner permission. If you ask permission and owner says yes, the legal clock resets to 0 every time. So you're saying the HOA owns part of my property? The HOA has established usage rights. Yes, those rights include reasonable maintenance activities. Show me the paperwork. Her smile faltered. "I'm sorry?" "Legal documents, recorded easement, deed restriction. Show me where it says you can dump snow on my land, then fine me for it." "That's proprietary board information. Submit a formal request." Translation: they had squat. Military service teaches you about contracts. Every base has legal agreements for everything. Equipment use, land access, waste disposal. You don't operate heavy machinery on someone's property without ironclad paperwork because when things go sideways, lawyers circle like vultures. "I'm formally requesting all documentation related to any easement, right-of-way, or usage agreement for my property. You've got 10 days, same as this bogus fine." Cordelia's face reddened. "Mr. Kavanaugh, I don't appreciate your tone. This neighborhood has standards, and your uncle—" "My uncle's dead. I'm not my uncle. If you don't have legal documentation for using my property, then you're trespassing every time those plows cross my land." She stepped outside, pulling her cashmere coat tighter. "Are you threatening the HOA? I'm asking for proof of your legal right to dump snow on my property." "That's not a threat. That's due diligence." Next morning, my phone buzzed with messages. Cordelia had blasted every homeowner about the uncooperative new resident who threatens neighborhood safety. Subject line: dangerous property owner blocks emergency access. Emergency access. Rich, considering the only emergency was their budget meeting where they decided my yard looked convenient for dumping problems. But here's where it got interesting. 3 neighbors knocked that afternoon, not to complain, but to ask questions. "Is it true the HOA doesn't have legal rights to your land?" asked Jim Martinez from 2 houses down. "That's what I'm trying to find out. Because they've been charging us $200 annually for road maintenance fees on that street. If they don't own it..." Now we were getting somewhere. Cordelia hadn't just been dumping illegally. She'd been collecting money for maintaining property she didn't control. Diesel fuel still hung in cold air from morning removal. I could hear salt crunching under my boots as I walked back inside. But for the first time since this started, I wasn't just angry, I was seeing opportunity. 25 years of heavy equipment operation teaches you the biggest problems often create the biggest leverage. Cordelia had just handed me a backhoe full of leverage. The question was, what to build with it. I spent the weekend shoveling. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to make a point. Every shovelful of their snow went right back where it came from, spread evenly across the HOA street. Monday morning, 6 a.m. sharp, my doorbell rang like a fire alarm. Cordelia stood on my porch with 2 board members, all looking like they'd swallowed something sour. "Mr. Kavanaugh, you cannot dump snow on HOA property. We're issuing a $5,000 fine for vandalism and destruction of common areas." 5,000. They'd multiplied the fine by 10 overnight. "Interesting," I said, sipping coffee. "Which HOA property would that be? The street running through my land?" "That street's been in continuous use since 1987. By whose permission?" Cordelia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She hadn't expected me to keep pushing. "Your uncle never objected. My uncle's gone. I am here, and I'm objecting. Show me the easement." A nervous guy in an expensive suit whispered in her ear. She waved him off like a mosquito. "Fine. We'll conduct a survey to establish our legal boundaries." "Great idea. I'll hire my own surveyor. Make sure we're working with accurate information. I called Morrison Land Surveying that afternoon. Chuck Morrison had done boundary work for half the county's construction projects. His reputation was bulletproof. If Chuck said a line was wrong, banks and courts believed him. How long has that street been there? He asked. Since 1987, according to them. And no recorded easement? That's what I'm figuring out. Chuck's crew showed up 3 days later with enough equipment to map the moon. Laser theodolites, GPS units, metal detectors hunting original property markers. I watched them work while laser equipment whirred through morning air, sharp spray paint smell filling my nostrils as they marked boundaries. The results were beautiful. Chuck handed me a survey that read like a medical examiner's report for the HOA's case. The street crossed exactly 42 feet onto my property. Not 40, not 45. 42 feet of clear documented trespass happening for 36 years. Here's the thing, Chuck explained, pointing to survey. Your uncle owned this free and clear. No easements recorded, no deed restrictions, no rights of way. If he let them use it, that was his choice. But legally, this street trespasses on your property every single day. Property surveys are public record. 20 minutes, $15. Most people never check because they assume someone else did the homework. Bad assumption. That assumption was about to cost the HOA dearly. I hand-delivered survey copies to every house in the development, not to be a jerk, but because people deserve truth about where their road maintenance fees were going. Response was immediate. My phone rang from 7 p.m. until midnight. Is this survey accurate? Asked Janet Pierce from Oak Street. Chuck Morrison surveyed it. You can verify with the county. So the HOA's been charging us for maintaining property they don't own? Looks that way. And all those snow removal fees? Also looks that way. By Thursday, Cordelia called an emergency board meeting to address what she called misinformation and property owner harassment. The meeting notice warned about believing unverified claims from disgruntled residents. Unverified claims. That's what she called a licensed surveyor's report. I showed up with my survey, Uncle Pete's original deed, and county records I'd pulled that afternoon. The community center was packed. Maybe 150 people in a room designed for 75. The air reeked of nervous sweat and burned coffee, tension thick enough to choke on. This neighborhood has functioned smoothly for 36 years, Cordelia announced. We will not allow one individual's greed to destroy our community. Greed. Rich, coming from someone collecting fees for property she didn't own. When they opened for questions, I stood. I'd like to see the recorded easement giving the HOA right to use my property. As I've explained, that information is proprietary. County records are public, Cordelia. There's no such thing as a proprietary easement. Shuffling papers filled the room as people whispered. I could feel momentum shifting. Do you have legal documentation or not? That's when Cordelia made her biggest mistake. Instead of deflecting, she doubled down. The HOA doesn't need to justify established usage rights to property owners who refuse to be good neighbors. And just like that, she'd admitted it. No legal documentation, no easement, no rights at all. The meeting exploded into chaos. I walked out smiling, because I'd just watched her hang herself with her own rope. What I found next would make Cordelia's adverse possession claim look like a parking ticket compared to federal fraud charges. The certified letter arrived Friday. Thick, expensive paper, law firm letterhead costing more to mail than most people make hourly. Berkshire, Ashton and Associates, the kind of white shoe firm charging $800 an hour to explain why you can't win. Cease and desist, property interference and harassment, read the subject line. Sarah was sorting medical bills when I opened it. Fresh coffee mixed with crisp, legal paper scent, and I could hear the furnace kicking on as December's cold deepened. What's that? She asked, looking up from insurance forms. Cordelia's lawyer wants me to stop asking for proof of their legal rights. 3 pages of legal intimidation disguised as professional correspondence. Phrases like prescriptive easement through adverse possession and established usage patterns constituting legal ownership filled paragraphs like smoke from a dumpster fire. But buried in paragraph 3 was the admission I'd waited for. While formal documentation may not have been recorded with county authorities, translation, they had nothing. I called Tony Brennan that afternoon. He'd handled Uncle Pete's estate and knew the property history better than anyone. 40 years of HOA disputes in Colorado made it practically a specialty practice. "They're bluffing," Tony said after reviewing their letter. "Adverse possession requires 18 years of hostile, open, and notorious use. But if your uncle gave permission, it resets the clock to 0 every time." "What if I can prove he gave permission?" "Then they have no case." "But Rex, understand what you're walking into. These people have deep pockets and expensive lawyers. You sure you want this fight?" I looked out at the snow mountains still sitting on my property. 3 weeks of the entire neighborhood's frozen problems dumped on my land because they thought I wouldn't push back. "Tony, they fined me $500 for snow they dumped, then raised it to $5,000 when I objected. They're charging neighbors for maintaining property they don't own. This isn't about money anymore." "What's it about?" "Respect. Making sure my daughters understand bullies only win when good people stay quiet." The next board meeting was December 20th. I submitted a formal request to speak, following parliamentary procedure to the letter. Robert's Rules of Order, agenda submissions, the whole bureaucratic dance they hid behind. Cordelia tried burying my request in new business, meaning I'd speak last after everyone left. But I'd read their bylaws cover to cover. Any property owner could address agenda items during relevant discussion. The meeting was standing room only. Word had spread faster than wildfire. Jim Martinez was there, along with Janet Pierce and 40 other homeowners asking questions about road maintenance fees. Cordelia called the meeting to order with theatrical authority, banging the gavel like announcing the Queen's arrival. Before tonight's agenda, I want to address misinformation circulating regarding HOA property rights and maintenance responsibilities. 15 minutes explaining how established usage patterns created legal ownership, how property surveys could be inaccurate, and how disruptive residents threatened property values. Masterclass in corporate doublespeak. Then she made her second biggest mistake. The HOA board has voted to formalize our established rights through proper legal channels. We'll be filing for adverse possession of the disputed area to protect community interests. The room went dead silent. Even heating systems seemed to pause. Adverse possession is basically legal theft, claiming someone's property because you've used it long enough. It's legitimate in specific circumstances, but filing false claims is fraud. When they opened for questions, I stood. "Cordelia, you just announced your intention to steal 42 feet of my property through adverse possession. Are you aware filing fraudulent claims is a felony?" "The board's legal counsel has advised our claim is valid." "Based on what documentation? You've had 3 weeks to produce evidence of legal rights. Show us the easement." "As I've repeatedly explained, established usage patterns, that's not documentation. That's not legal proof. That's a fancy way of saying you've been trespassing 36 years. Tension was thick enough to cut with a shovel. Nervous sweat mixed with stale community center air, shifting chairs echoing like gunshots. "Mr. Kavanaugh," Cordelia said, voice rising to that shrill pitch privileged people use when not getting their way, "this board will not be intimidated by threats or harassment. If you continue this disruptive behavior, we'll take appropriate action." "What action would that be?" "Legal action, financial penalties, whatever necessary to protect this community." There it was. She'd just threatened me in front of 60 witnesses for asking to see legal documentation. I sat down without another word because I didn't need to. Every person in that room had watched Cordelia admit they had no legal rights while threatening to destroy me for asking questions. The meeting ended 20 minutes later in chaos, half the audience demanding answers, the other half heading for exits. But I stayed in my chair, smiling. I'd gotten everything I needed. Cordelia had declared war. Now it was time to show her what happened when you picked a fight with someone who owned heavy equipment. In 12 hours, Cordelia would be in handcuffs. But first, she had to give me one final gift. Christmas morning, while my family opened presents, I was at the county recorder's office. Yeah, they're closed Christmas, but I'd befriended Deputy Recorder Maria Santos during weeks of research. She'd agreed to meet for an hour to help search historical records. "What exactly are you looking for?" she asked, pulling document boxes from 1987. "Proof my uncle gave the HOA permission to use his property." Maria pulled files like a detective working a cold case. 36 years of paperwork spread across the table, and somewhere in that mountain was Cordelia's death warrant. We went through every deed, every easement filing, every correspondence related to Stonefield Manor's development. The records told a clear story, but not what I'd expected. The original developer, Stonefield Construction, had planned dedicating the street section as public right-of-way. Standard practice, build the street, transfer ownership to county for maintenance, but something went wrong during permitting. Environmental studies, wetland restrictions, cost overruns, usual development nightmares. By late 1987, Stonefield Construction was bankrupt. The county refused accepting incomplete street dedication. The HOA formed to manage the mess, but they never acquired legal rights to Uncle Pete's land. "Here's the smoking gun," Maria said, pulling a handwritten letter dated January 15, 1988. Uncle Pete's letter to the original HOA board, written in his careful carpenter's handwriting. "Gentlemen, I understand your need to use my property for street access until the county situation gets resolved. You have my permission to cross my land for now, but I expect this to be temporary. Please keep me informed about your progress with the county. Sincerely, Peter Kavanaugh." Permission. Temporary permission. Legal kryptonite for adverse possession claims. But Maria wasn't done. She'd found something else in 1995 tax records. "Your uncle wrote the county assessor that year," she said, showing me a photocopy. "He claimed tax reduction because part of his property was being used for neighborhood access at owner's discretion." Owner's discretion. Every year from 1995 to 2019, Uncle Pete documented he was allowing access as a favor, not legal obligation. 24 years of written evidence their use wasn't hostile. The adverse possession clock had never started ticking. But the real revelation came when Maria pulled recent property tax records. "Look at this," she said, pointing to line items I'd never noticed. The HOA's been claiming tax exemptions for road maintenance expenses on property they don't own. They've deducted $47,000 over 5 years. Tax fraud. They'd been writing off maintenance costs for property they had no legal right to maintain. Tax fraud investigators are like bloodhounds. Show them one irregular deduction, and they'll audit back to the Paleozoic era. "Maria, this is beautiful, but why didn't anyone catch this before?" Nobody looks unless there's a dispute. The county assumes people are honest about tax claims. Bad assumption when dealing with Cordelia Ashford. I drove home with copies of everything, mind racing through implications. The HOA built their entire snow removal strategy on property they didn't own. They'd collected road maintenance fees for unauthorized services. They'd claimed tax exemptions for fraudulent expenses. And they'd just announced intention to steal my property through adverse possession, despite documented evidence their use was permissive, not hostile. Sarah was making coffee when I walked into the kitchen, still buzzing from morning discoveries. "Good news?" she asked, seeing my expression. "Better than good. I found Uncle Pete's permission letter." And Cordelia just stepped in the biggest legal trap of her life. She doesn't know it yet, but she's about to learn what happens when you threaten a combat engineer with documentation, heavy equipment, and absolutely nothing left to lose. Fresh coffee mixed with satisfaction of overwhelming evidence, and I could hear Emma and Grace laughing in the living room with Christmas gifts. For the first time in months, everything felt exactly as it should, except for that snow mountain in my yard. Time to turn that problem into the solution Cordelia would never forget. The day after Christmas, I spread Uncle Pete's letter, tax records, and survey documents across my kitchen table like a general planning invasion. Sarah brought coffee while I sketched what would become the most satisfying construction project of my career. "You're really building a wall?" she asked, studying my drawings. "Not just any wall, the most perfectly legal, absolutely bulletproof, completely immovable wall in Colorado history. 25 years of heavy equipment operation teaches you the best solutions are simple, visible, and impossible to ignore." Cordelia wanted to play property rights games? Perfect. I'd give her a masterclass in what property rights actually meant. The design was elegant in simplicity. 12-foot wall of compacted snow and ice, reinforced with steel rebar every 18 inches, positioned exactly on my property line where their street attempted crossing my land. Not blocking a public road, blocking private trespass. I called union buddies first. When equipment operators stick together, amazing things happen. "Rex, you crazy bastard," laughed Danny Torres, who ran the local operating engineers chapter. "You want to borrow what?" "Compactor, snowblower, maybe some rebar. I'm building a property line improvement." "This about that HOA thing? Because half the guys are dealing with similar crap in their neighborhoods." Word had spread through the union. Danny called back with a crew list that read like a revenge fantasy. We got compactors, rebar, and 3 days of guys who hate HOA bullies. By New Year's Day, I had commitments for equipment, materials, and volunteer labor from guys who understood the satisfaction of perfectly executed projects. Chuck Morrison stopped by to review wall placement. We marked every inch with spray paint and stakes, ensuring the structure would sit entirely on my property while completely blocking illegal street access. Legally speaking, Chuck explained, you have absolute right to improve your property however you want, long as you stay within boundaries. Property law's beauty is simplicity. Your land, your rules. No permits required for snow management on private property. No height restrictions for temporary winter structures. No environmental studies for frozen water. Tony Brennan reviewed the entire plan with bomb squad technician thoroughness. Rex, this is either brilliant or insane, possibly both. Which side of the law am I on? Completely legal. Cordelia Street has no more right crossing your property than I do. You could build a house on that spot if you wanted. I don't want a house. I want justice. We calculated the financial pressure this would create. The HOA had exactly 2 options: pay me for legal access rights or spend $50,000 building new road around my property. Either way, their free ride was over. But I wasn't stopping with the wall. Maria Santos had introduced me to Detective Frank Kowalski from County Fraud Division. Filing false tax claims gets law enforcement very interested very quickly. You're saying they deducted $47,000 in maintenance costs for property they don't own? Frank asked, reviewing Maria's documentation. Plus collecting road fees from homeowners for the same property. Frank's eyes lit like Christmas morning. White-collar crime investigators live for cases with clear paper trails and obvious victims. Keep building your wall, Rex. We'll handle the financial investigation. By January 3rd, everything was positioned. Equipment staged at neighbor Jim's house to avoid trespassing accusations. Rebar delivered and sorted by length. Security cameras installed to document every construction moment and trespassing attempt. Emma and Grace helped prepare final details. They'd inherited their mother's attention to detail and father's love of well-executed plans. Dad, what if they try tearing it down? Grace asked, watching me test camera angles. Then they'll be destroying private property on video. That's called vandalism. And if they call police? Then police will ask to see their easement documentation, which doesn't exist. Emma laughed at the trap's elegance. So basically they can't win? Sweetheart, when you control territory and have overwhelming documentation, the only way to lose is by not taking action. Military engineers learn defensive positions succeed through 3 principles: legal authority, physical impossibility, and public visibility. My wall would demonstrate all 3 simultaneously. Final piece was media strategy. Local news stations love David versus Goliath stories, especially involving dramatic visuals and clear villains. I'd contacted Channel 7's investigative team about HOA financial irregularities. We're interested, said reporter Jessica Chang during our call. Can you guarantee visual impact? 12 feet high, 30 feet wide, blocking access to 200 homes, plus arrests. Arrests? Cordelia's going to lose her mind when she sees it, and she's definitely trying something stupid. Jessica's excitement was audible. When do we film? January 8th. Be here by 6 a.m. Bring good cameras. Motor oil and hydraulic fluid filled my garage as I performed final maintenance on General Patton. 25 years of moving earth taught me to respect equipment preparation. Tomorrow's mission required perfect execution. Sarah found me at midnight, making final blade angle adjustments. You ready for this? She asked. I looked at wall plans, legal documentation, and communication strategy spread across my workbench. Honey, I've been ready since December 15th. Tomorrow, Cordelia Ashford learns what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. January 4th brought the most expensive legal letter I'd ever seen. Hand-delivered by a courier costing more per hour than most people make daily, the envelope was thick enough to stop bullets and carried Morrison, Sterling, and Associates letterhead, the kind defending Fortune 500 companies against federal investigations. Mr. Kavanaugh, the cover letter began, our client, Stonefield Manor HOA, has retained our services to pursue adverse possession claims and criminal trespassing charges related to your interference with established property rights. Criminal trespassing charges against me on my own property. Sarah read over my shoulder while I worked through 8 pages of legal threats disguised as professional correspondence. fresh ground coffee mixed with expensive paper and cheaper intimidation tactics. "They're saying you could face federal charges for interfering with community infrastructure," she said, voice tight with worry. "They're saying lots of things, none true." But Cordelia wasn't just escalating legally. She'd hired Morrison Sterling for one reason: bury me in paperwork until I gave up or went broke. Their retainer alone probably cost more than my annual equipment maintenance budget. Morrison Sterling Associates, where billable hours go to die expensive deaths. The letter demanded immediate cessation of all property harassment activities, removal of survey stakes, and payment of accumulated fines now totaling $8,000. It included adverse possession filing timeline transferring legal ownership of my property's street access to the HOA within 60 days. I called Tony Brennan immediately. "Rex, this is scorched earth legal warfare. They're trying to overwhelm you with costs." "Can they do that?" "They can try. But their adverse possession claim is still fraudulent regardless of how expensive their lawyers are. Question is whether you want to fight a war of attrition." That afternoon, I did something Cordelia never expected. Instead of responding through lawyers, I started documenting everything with military precision. Every HOA truck crossing my property got photographed with timestamps. Every board member driving down their street got documented as trespassing. Every snowplow load dumped on my land got measured and recorded. I'd learned this technique in Afghanistan. When facing superior firepower, gather intelligence until you find their weakness. Cordelia's weakness revealed itself. January 5th. Jim Martinez knocked around dinner time, holding a manila folder and looking nervous. "Rex, I think you need to see this." Jim's folder landed on my table with the weight of evidence and the sweet sound of justice knocking. Inside were photocopied HOA financial statements going back 3 years. Jim served on Architectural Review Committee, giving him access to budget documents most homeowners never saw. "Look at the road maintenance line items," he said, pointing to highlighted entries. The numbers were staggering. Cordelia's management company, Ashford Property Services, had billed the HOA $47,000 for street maintenance and snow removal in 2023 alone. But according to Jim's records, actual snow removal costs were less than $12,000. "Where'd the other $35,000 go?" I asked. "Ashford Property Services. Cordelia owns the management company billing the HOA. She's been paying herself. Self-dealing. In nonprofit law, that's embezzlement." But Jim wasn't finished. He'd found something better in 2022 records. "She's been billing residents $200 each for road maintenance, then billing the management company $300 per household for same services. She's double charging for work costing half what she claims." The mathematics were beautiful in their criminality. Cordelia collected $400 per household annually for road maintenance costing $100 to perform, then paid herself the difference through her management company. Multiply that by 200 households over 3 years, and you're looking at serious federal fraud. "Jim, why are you showing me this?" "Because she just assessed everyone an additional $500 special fee for legal defense costs related to your frivolous property claims. People are pissed." The special assessment was Cordelia's biggest mistake yet. Instead of absorbing legal costs through normal HOA reserves, she'd decided taxing every homeowner to fund her personal war against me. Nothing turns neighbors against HOA boards faster than surprise special assessments, especially funding obviously frivolous lawsuits. By January 6th, my phone rang constantly with calls from homeowners suddenly interested in HOA financial transparency. "Rex, is it true Cordelia's been stealing road money?" asked Janet Pierce. "That's what the documents suggest." "And now she wants us paying for lawyers to help her steal more?" "Looks that way." Momentum was shifting. Cordelia's legal intimidation had backfired by triggering scrutiny of her financial management. Her special assessment had united previously neutral homeowners against board leadership. But she wasn't done escalating. January 7th brought Deputy Williams knocking, looking about as enthusiastic as a man attending his own funeral. "Mr. Kavanaugh, I've got a complaint about criminal trespassing and property destruction." "Filed by who?" "Cordelia Ashford. She says you've been placing unauthorized markers on HOA property." I handed him survey documents and property deed. "Deputy, those markers are on my property. Ms. Ashford's welcome to prove otherwise." He spent 20 minutes reviewing Chuck Morrison's survey, Uncle Pete's deed, and county records Maria provided. Papers rustled, mixed with distant highway hum and metallic winter air taste. "Mr. Kavanaugh, these documents appear in order. Ms. Ashford may be mistaken about property boundaries." Deputy Williams: "Ms. Ashford's been collecting money for maintaining property she doesn't own while threatening legal action against the actual owner. You might want looking into that." He left with copies of everything, and I went back to final preparations for tomorrow's construction project. The special assessment was Cordelia's biggest mistake yet, because nothing turns neighbors into enemies faster than surprise taxes, and I was about to give them a target for all that anger. Sunday, January 7th, 11 p.m. I was in my garage performing final maintenance on General Patton when security cameras picked up headlights in my driveway. 3 cars, moving slowly, parking just outside camera range. I watched through my phone app as 6 people got out: Cordelia, 2 other board members, and 3 men I didn't recognize. They walked to my property edge, flashlights sweeping across survey stakes I'd positioned for tomorrow's construction. One stranger started pulling up stakes. I called 911 first, then hit record on my phone as I walked outside. "Evening, folks. Can I help you with something?" The group froze like deer in headlights. Cordelia recovered first, stepping forward with her usual imperious attitude. "Mr. Kavanaugh, these unauthorized markers are creating confusion about property boundaries. We're removing them to prevent accidents. Those markers are on my property, placed by licensed surveyor. You're destroying private property. The HOA has established rights. Show me the documentation." One stranger, a heavy-set guy in expensive clothes, stepped between us. "Sir, I'm Vincent Morrison from Morrison Sterling. My client has legal authority to maintain community infrastructure." "Your client doesn't own this property, and you're all trespassing." Morrison smiled the way lawyers do when thinking they're smarter than everyone else. "Mr. Kavanaugh, continued interference with HOA operations could result in significant legal consequences." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm informing you of potential outcomes." That's when Deputy Williams arrived, responding to my 911 call with speed of someone who'd already dealt with the situation once today. "What's the problem here?" he asked, shining flashlight across the group. "These people are on my property without permission, destroying survey markers," I said, handing him my phone with video evidence. Williams reviewed footage, then looked at Morrison. "Sir, you're an attorney?" "Vincent Morrison, Morrison Sterling Associates, representing the HOA. Are you aware interfering with licensed survey markers is a misdemeanor?" Morrison's confidence evaporated. "Officer, my client has established usage rights. Based on what documentation?" Silence stretched 30 seconds while 6 people realized they had no good answers. "Everyone off the property," Williams ordered. "Now!" As they retreated to cars, Cordelia turned back toward me. Even in dim light, her fury was visible. "This isn't over, Mr. Kavanaugh. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Actually, Cordelia, I know exactly what I'm dealing with. A fraud investigation starts tomorrow morning." Her face went white. "What fraud investigation?" "Ask Detective Kowalski. He's very interested in your management company's billing practices." Cars left my driveway faster than they'd arrived, and Williams finished his report with thoroughness of a man documenting evidence for future court proceedings. "Rex, be careful," he said before leaving. "People like this don't give up easy." He was right. Monday morning brought Cordelia's final desperate move. At 5:30 a.m., my security cameras detected movement. Not at my property this time, at Jim Martinez's house, where my equipment was staged. 2 men with crowbars were attempting to disable General Patton's hydraulic systems. I called Sheriff's Department while grabbing my shotgun and sprinting across the street in pajamas. The saboteurs heard me coming and ran, but not before damaging hydraulic lines on my compactor. The hydraulic fluid pooled black and viscous on frozen asphalt, evidence of Cordelia's desperation written in industrial blood. 20 minutes later, Detective Kowalski arrived to process the scene. He found hydraulic fluid, tool marks, and footprints leading back toward Ashford Property Services Company truck parked 3 blocks away. "Rex, this escalated to property destruction. We can arrest whoever ordered this." "Can you prove Cordelia ordered it?" "Working on it, but your wall construction might want to wait until—" "Detective, my wall construction happens today, as scheduled. She just proved how desperate she is." Danny Torres and crew arrived at 6 a.m. with replacement hydraulic lines and enough righteous anger to power a small city. Equipment operators take sabotage personally, especially when targeting one of their own. Nobody messes with union equipment, Danny announced while installing new hydraulic fittings. This job just became a matter of professional pride. By 7 a.m., Jessica Chang from Channel 7 was setting up cameras while my crew tested equipment one final time. Diesel fuel mixed with hydraulic fluid and winter air, creating unmistakable scent of serious construction about to happen. "Rex, any final words before we start filming?" Jessica asked. I looked at the snow mountain Cordelia's crew had dumped on my property over 3 weeks. Hundreds of tons of frozen evidence of their illegal dumping, financial fraud, and absolute contempt for property rights. Yeah. Sometimes the best solution to a problem is to turn it into something bigger, more visible, and completely impossible to ignore. Danny fired up General Patton's engine, sound echoing across Stonefield Manor like a declaration of war. In the distance, I could see curtains moving as neighbors realized something significant was about to happen. Cordelia had spent 3 weeks underestimating a combat engineer with heavy equipment and legitimate grievances. She was about to discover the difference between threatening someone and actually fighting them. By 7 a.m., Jessica Chang was setting up cameras while Cordelia slept peacefully in her mansion, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse on live television. At 8 a.m. sharp, General Patton's blade bit into the first pile of snow with the satisfying crunch of justice being served. The hydraulic whine of compactor mixed with diesel engine roar as we began transforming 3 weeks of illegally dumped snow into the most perfectly positioned property improvement in Colorado history. Jessica Chang and her camera crew captured every moment from multiple angles while Danny Torres operated the compactor with surgical precision. Each pass compressed snow and ice into solid blocks, building the wall 18 inches at a time. "Rex, describe what you're building," Jessica said, shoving a microphone toward me while General Patton moved another ton of snow into position. "Exactly what the title says, turning their snow into a wall that blocks their street. 12 feet high, 30 feet wide, positioned precisely on my property line where their private road illegally crosses my land." The engineering was beautiful. We'd calculated the wall's footprint to block access without extending onto the HOA street itself. Every cubic foot sat entirely on my property, making destruction or removal a clear case of vandalism. By 9 a.m., homeowners started gathering at the property line. Word had spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire, and people wanted to see the spectacle firsthand. Some angry, some amused, but everyone fascinated. "Is this legal?" asked Margaret Wilson from Pine Street, watching us install steel rebar into compressed snow. "Completely legal," I replied, handing her survey copy. "Private property improvements don't require anyone's permission except the property owners." The wall grew systematically, each layer reinforced with rebar and compressed until solid enough to support a truck. Hydraulic machinery sound mixed with excited conversations as more neighbors arrived to witness Cordelia's comeuppance. At 9:45 a.m., the white Mercedes appeared. Cordelia drove up to the construction site like she owned the place, which was ironic considering she was about to discover she owned significantly less than she thought. She parked illegally in the HOA street and stormed toward my property line with Vincent Morrison trailing behind like an expensive lapdog. "Stop this immediately!" she screamed over equipment noise. I signaled Danny to shut down General Patton. The sudden silence felt dramatic, like the moment before thunder. "Good morning, Cordelia. Beautiful day for construction, isn't it? You cannot block access to this neighborhood." "I'm not blocking access to anything. I'm improving my property within my legal boundaries." Jessica Chang moved closer with her camera, recognizing television gold when she saw it. The growing crowd of neighbors provided perfect background drama, while Cordelia worked herself into a fury that would be replayed on social media for years. "This is community property," Cordelia shouted, pointing at the street. "Show me the documentation," I replied calmly. Morrison stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation with professional authority. "Mr. Kavanaugh, this is an inappropriate response to a civil dispute." "Mr. Morrison, your client has been dumping snow on my property for 3 weeks, collecting fees for maintaining land she doesn't own, and threatening legal action when I asked for proof of her rights. What would be an appropriate response?" That's when Cordelia made her final, fatal mistake. Instead of retreating or calling for legal mediation, she decided to physically stop the construction herself. She walked onto my property, grabbed a survey stake, and started pulling it out of the ground. The survey stake crackled like breaking bones as Cordelia destroyed the last of her legal credibility on camera. "Cordelia," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, You're trespassing on private property and destroying legally placed survey markers. I don't care. This neighborhood has standards. Deputy Williams chose that exact moment to arrive, responding to noise complaints but finding something much more interesting. He parked his cruiser just as Cordelia threw the survey stake at my feet. "Ma'am, step away from the property line," Williams ordered. "Officer, this man is blocking community access." Williams looked at the wall, now 8 feet high and obviously positioned entirely on my side of the property line. He reviewed survey documentation I handed him, then looked at Cordelia. "Ma'am, do you have legal documentation proving HOA ownership of this property? We have established usage rights, legal documentation, recorded easement, deed restriction. This is ridiculous. People like him need to know their place." The crowd went dead silent. Even the construction crew stopped working to stare at Cordelia, who just revealed exactly what this dispute was really about. People like him. The racist undertone hung in the morning air like toxic smoke, and every witness understood they'd just heard Cordelia's true motivation. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for criminal trespassing and destruction of private property," Williams said, reaching for his handcuffs. Cordelia's meltdown was spectacular. She screamed about property values, neighborhood standards, and people not knowing their place while Williams read her Miranda rights. Morrison tried to intervene legally, but there's no lawyering your way out of criminal trespassing caught on video. The white Mercedes sat abandoned in the street while its owner was loaded into the back of a sheriff's cruiser, still shouting about community rights and established patterns. Jessica Chang got every moment on camera, from the arrest to the crowd's reaction to the completed wall blocking access to 200 homes. "Rex, any final comments?" she asked as the cruiser drove away. I looked at the wall, the crowd, and the street full of trapped cars that couldn't leave until their HOA figured out how to negotiate with the property owner they'd been abusing for weeks. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to make it impossible to ignore. The wall stood for exactly 6 hours, not because it wasn't solid. Danny's crew had built it to last until spring. But by 2 p.m., the HOA's emergency board meeting had reached the obvious conclusion. Negotiating was cheaper than building a $50,000 alternate road. The emergency board meeting was held in my living room because the community center was on the wrong side of my wall. 3 remaining board members, Vincent Morrison and a court-appointed mediator named Patricia Wells, sat around my kitchen table while Channel 7 filmed through the window. Sarah served coffee and watched 200 households' worth of leverage play out in real time. "Mr. Kavanaugh," Morrison began, "my clients are prepared to discuss reasonable access arrangements." "I'm listening." Patricia Wells spread documents across the table with efficiency of someone who'd mediated property disputes for 20 years. "The HOA acknowledges no legal easement exists. They're requesting permission to establish formal access rights through negotiated agreement." Translation: they wanted to pay rent for using my property instead of stealing it. The terms were straightforward. $35,000 in back payments for 3 years of illegal dumping. $2,000 monthly for documented easement rights. HOA responsibility for all snow removal at their expense. And formal recorded easement with county that could be revoked if terms were violated. "What about Cordelia's management company?" I asked. "Mrs. Ashford has resigned from the board effective immediately. Her management contract has been terminated." Detective Kowalski had worked fast. By noon, Ashford Property Services was under federal investigation for mail fraud, tax evasion, and non-profit embezzlement. Cordelia would spend the next 2 years fighting charges that would cost her more than she'd stolen. And the special assessment for legal fees? Rescinded. All homeowners will receive full refunds. I looked at Sarah, who nodded. We'd discussed the terms during morning's construction, and both agreed victory was more important than vengeance. I accept the offer with one modification. The back payment goes to Jefferson County Veteran Services for PTSD treatment programs. Morrison looked confused. "You don't want the money?" "I want justice." Justice means making sure other people don't get bullied by HOA boards who think property rights don't apply to them. The papers were signed by 4 p.m. By 5 p.m., General Patton had carved a careful gap in the wall wide enough for emergency vehicle access. The full wall would stay until spring, serving as a visible reminder of what happens when HOA boards mistake kindness for weakness. Channel 7's evening news coverage went viral within hours. Veteran uses snow to block HOA after dumping dispute hit social media like a guided missile. generating 3 million views and 15,000 comments in the first 24 hours. The story resonated because everyone knows someone who's dealt with HOA abuse. Property owners across the country shared their own horror stories, and several contacted me for advice on fighting similar battles. 6 months later, Sarah and I established the Property Rights Defense Fund, using media attention from the Wall story to raise money for legal assistance to homeowners facing HOA abuse. We've helped 47 families fight fraudulent fines, illegal assessments, and documented discrimination. Emma and Grace learned something important about standing up to bullies, not with violence or anger, but with documentation, preparation, and the willingness to make problems visible until they're impossible to ignore. The wall melted in April, revealing perfectly healthy grass underneath. Turns out snow's actually good insulation for dormant winter lawns. Who knew? Cordelia's white Mercedes disappeared from the neighborhood 3 weeks after her arrest. Word is she moved to Florida, where HOA regulations are even more complicated and federal investigators have longer memories. Vincent Morrison sends me a Christmas card every year with pictures of his family. Turns out representing property owners against abusive HOA boards pays better than defending HOA boards against property owners. He's made a career change that benefits everyone. The Stonefield Manor HOA is now run by Jim Martinez and Janet Pierce, with financial transparency that would make federal accountants weep with joy. Road maintenance costs exactly what it should cost, and snow gets removed to legitimate disposal sites instead of residents' front yards. But here's what makes me proudest. 3 other neighborhoods have used my story as a template for fighting their own HOA battles. Documentation, legal preparation, and strategic use of public pressure works, whether you're dealing with snow dumping, fraudulent fines, or discriminatory enforcement. Sometimes the best way to fix a broken system is to show everyone exactly how broken it really is. Got your own HOA nightmare story? Drop it in the comments below. And if this story taught you something about property rights, hit that subscribe button. Because next week I'm telling you about my neighbor's decorative fence that turned their pool party into a crime scene. Trust me, you're going to want to hear this one.